Every single moment of your life right now, your relationships, your bank account, your health, even the people who surround you, was created by thoughts you had months or years ago, and you have no idea you did it. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet who entered altered states of consciousness to access universal wisdom, revealed something so radical about human consciousness that it flips everything we think we know about reality. We are not victims of circumstance, but constant creators, manifesting our external world through the vibrational frequency of our thoughts, whether we realize it or not. The issue isn't that manifestation doesn't work. It's that it works perfectly all the time, creating both the beautiful and the devastating experiences in our lives based on the mental patterns we habitually hold. Most people spend their entire existence unconsciously manifesting poverty, illness, and loneliness, while wondering why life feels so hard, never understanding they're wielding the most powerful creative force in the universe without any training or awareness. What would change in your life if you truly grasped that every thought you think is a seed planted in invisible soil, destined to bloom into your lived experience? Share in the comments, what area of your life would you transform first if you fully understood your thoughts were creating it? What if I told you that the reason manifestation feels like mystical, wishful thinking to most people is because they're trying to create from the wrong level of consciousness? In his readings, Edgar Cayce didn't describe manifestation as some magical shortcut to material wealth. He revealed it as a fundamental spiritual law governing how consciousness itself operates in a universe designed by divine intelligence. According to Cayce, thought is not merely electrical activity in the brain. It's a living force, a form of energy that moves through dimensions of reality we cannot see with physical eyes, organizing matter and circumstance according to its vibrational signature. Here's what Cayce understood that modern manifestation teachers often miss. Thoughts don't just attract similar circumstances through some vague law of attraction. They literally construct reality at the energetic level, building the framework upon which physical experiences will eventually materialize. Cayce explained in his trance states that the mind operates across multiple dimensions simultaneously. What you think in the conscious mind sends ripples through the subconscious, which then impresses itself upon what Cayce called the superconscious, your connection to divine creative intelligence. It's at this superconscious level where thought becomes causative, where mental images and emotional frequencies begin the process of materialization that will eventually cascade down into your three-dimensional experience. But here's the part that stops most people from manifesting what they claim they want. Cayce insisted that thoughts mixed with strong emotion create far more powerfully than intellectual wishes. A passing thought has minimal creative force, but a thought charged with deep feeling, whether that feeling is faith and expectation or fear and doubt, that thought becomes a command to the creative forces of the universe. This is why people manifest their fears with such stunning consistency. They may spend 5 minutes visualizing abundance, but they spend 5 hours feeling anxious about bills, replaying scenarios of failure, imagining rejection. The universe doesn't judge which thoughts are positive or negative. It simply responds to vibrational intensity and consistency. Think about what this means for your life right now. What do you think about most consistently? Not what you claim you want, but what actually occupies your mental and emotional space hour after hour. Because Cayce revealed something uncomfortable, you cannot manifest a reality that contradicts your dominant mental atmosphere. If your habitual thought patterns are saturated with unworthiness, lack, resentment, or fear, you will continue creating experiences that reflect and reinforce those patterns, regardless of how many affirmations you speak or vision boards you create. Cayce went further, explaining that thought forms, concentrated patterns of mental energy, don't simply dissolve when you stop thinking them. They accumulate in what he called the mental realm, creating momentum and attracting circumstances that match their frequency. This is why breaking negative patterns feels so difficult. You're not just changing a thought, you're dismantling accumulated energetic structures you've been building for years, possibly lifetimes. Those structures have inertia. They want to persist. They draw you back into familiar mental loops, even when you consciously decide to think differently. So what's the solution? Cayce didn't offer superficial techniques. He taught that genuine manifestation requires something most people aren't willing to do, a complete reconstruction of consciousness. It begins with self-awareness, becoming conscious of your unconscious thought patterns. Most people operate on autopilot, recycling the same fears, judgments, and limiting beliefs their parents held, their culture reinforced, their painful experiences confirmed. You cannot change what you cannot see. The first step in conscious creation is catching yourself in the act of unconscious creation, watching your thoughts without judgment, recognizing the patterns that run your mental life. But awareness alone isn't enough. Cayce emphasized that the will, your conscious decision-making power, must be trained and strengthened. When you catch yourself spiraling into fear-based thinking, will yourself back to a thought aligned with what you intend to create. This isn't positive thinking or denial of challenges. It's choosing which reality you're going to feed with your attention and emotional energy. Cayce taught that the will, when properly developed, acts as a bridge between your current reality and your desired reality, holding you steady in the new mental pattern even when external circumstances haven't shifted yet. Here's where most people abandon the process. There's always a gap between when you change your thinking and when physical reality catches up. Cayce called this the gestation period, and it tests everything you believe about manifestation. You begin thinking thoughts of abundance, but your bank account stays empty. You shift into thoughts of health, but your symptoms persist. This gap is where doubt creeps in, where the old patterns try to reclaim dominance, where most people decide manifestation doesn't work. But Cayce insisted this gap is where faith becomes operative, not blind belief, but the spiritual knowing that consciousness precedes form, that the invisible precedes the visible, that if you hold the pattern steady in mind, the universe must eventually reflect it in matter. What are you doing during that gap? Are you treating the delay as evidence that it's not working, thereby canceling your own manifestation? Or are you living from the end, thinking, feeling, and acting as though the desired reality is already true at the consciousness level, even before your five senses confirm it? Cayce also revealed something that modern manifestation culture conveniently ignores. Manifestation isn't about overriding divine will or manipulating reality for selfish gain. It's about aligning your individual consciousness with universal consciousness, creating in harmony with your soul's purpose and the greater good. In his readings, Cayce encountered people constantly who were trying to manifest things that contradicted their soul's mission. They wanted wealth to escape work. They wanted relationships to avoid loneliness without becoming genuinely loving. They wanted health without addressing the spiritual and emotional roots of their illness. And the universe, in its wisdom, didn't deliver, not to punish them, but to protect them from manifesting experiences that would derail their spiritual growth. This is the missing key. Your thoughts create your reality, but your soul knows what reality you actually need for your evolution. Sometimes what looks like manifestation failure is actually divine protection. Sometimes the gap between thought and form is giving you time to examine whether what you think you want is what you're truly here to experience. Cayce taught that the highest form of manifestation isn't getting what the ego wants. It's aligning so completely with your soul's purpose that what you manifest naturally serves your spiritual mission. So let me ask you directly, are you trying to manifest from ego or from soul? Are your desires rooted in fear of lack, need for validation, or escape from discomfort? Or are they emerging from a genuine sense of purpose, service, and alignment with the divine plan for your life? Because Cayce's readings suggest the universe enthusiastically supports the latter and gently resists the former. Here's another layer Cayce revealed that transforms everything. The subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between imagination and physical experience. When you vividly imagine a desired outcome, not as fantasy, but as concentrated mental creation, your subconscious accepts it as real and begins reorganizing your energy, your behavior, your perceptions to align with that reality. This is why Cayce recommended what we might now call visualization, but with far more depth than most people practice. He suggested entering a meditative state, stilling the conscious mind's chatter, and then building a detailed, emotionally rich experience of your desired reality in your inner world. Not once, but repeatedly, until your subconscious has no choice but to accept this new pattern as its dominant program. But here's what makes this truly powerful. Cayce taught that imagination is not separate from reality. It's where reality is created. The mental plane is the first plane of manifestation. When you create something clearly in imagination, you've already brought it into existence at the causal level. Physical manifestation is simply the final stage, the point where the energetic pattern becomes dense enough to register in three-dimensional reality. This means your imagination isn't escapism or fantasy. It's your creative workshop, the place where you design the blueprints the universe will construct. How much time do you spend in that creative workshop? Or do you let your imagination run wild with worst-case scenarios, traumatic memories, and fearful projections, wondering why your life reflects chaos? Cayce also addressed something crucial about collective manifestation. You're not creating in isolation. You're embedded in families, communities, nations, and ultimately a collective human consciousness that's also creating reality. When your personal vibration contradicts the collective vibration you're immersed in, manifestation becomes more challenging. Not impossible, but requiring greater intensity of focus and faith. This is why Cayce emphasized the importance of spiritual community, surrounding yourself with people who hold similar values and vibrations, creating together rather than struggling alone against collective negativity. And here's where it gets both challenging and liberating. You cannot manifest for others. You cannot think positive thoughts that override someone else's reality creation. If someone you love is manifesting illness or lack, you can hold the highest vision for them. You can pray, you can offer support, but their consciousness creates their experience, not yours. This is simultaneously the hardest lesson for compassionate people to accept and the key to maintaining your own energetic integrity. You're not responsible for what others manifest. You're responsible for what you manifest and how you respond to what they manifest. Let me take you deeper into Cayce's understanding of how quickly thoughts manifest. He explained that thoughts aligned with spiritual law, love, service, oneness, faith, manifest more rapidly than thoughts rooted in separation, selfishness, or fear. Why? Because spiritual thoughts move with the current of universal energy, while ego-based thoughts move against it. It's the difference between swimming downstream and struggling upstream. Both get you somewhere, but one exhausts you while the other flows naturally. When you manifest from love, from genuine care for others, from desire to serve your soul's purpose, the universe rushes to support you. When you manifest from greed, fear of loss, or need to control, you're forcing creation, and it requires enormous, draining effort. This explains why some people seem to manifest effortlessly, while others struggle despite intense effort. It's not that the universe plays favorites, it's that some people have aligned their consciousness with spiritual law, while others are working against it. The universe doesn't judge you for ego-based desires, but it won't make ego-driven manifestation easy either. That difficulty is itself a teaching, redirecting you toward alignment with your higher self. If you're watching this video right now and feeling overwhelmed by how much of your current reality you've unconsciously created, that's actually a breakthrough moment. It means you're ready to become conscious, and consciousness changes everything. Cayce taught that the moment you fully accept responsibility for your thought life, not in self-blame but in empowered recognition of your creative capacity, that moment you reclaim your spiritual authority. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become a conscious co-creator with the divine. But let me challenge you. Are you willing to commit to the discipline this requires? Because conscious manifestation isn't about thinking positive occasionally. It's about moment-by-moment vigilance over your mental and emotional state. It's about catching the fearful thought before it loops into a pattern. It's about redirecting resentment into forgiveness, lack thinking into gratitude, doubt into faith. Not because you're supposed to, but because you understand these mental shifts are literally crafting your future experience. Cayce also revealed the role of meditation in cleansing the subconscious of old patterns. In stillness, you access deeper levels of consciousness where the accumulated thought forms of your past can be dissolved. When you meditate regularly, you're not just relaxing. You're entering the mental realm where manifestation happens and you're cleaning house. You're releasing old energies that contradict your new intentions. This is why Cayce emphasized daily meditation as essential spiritual practice, not optional. Without it, you're trying to plant new seeds in soil still full of weeds. The weeds will choke out your new growth every time. And here's something that might surprise you. Cayce taught that service to others accelerates your personal manifestation. Why? Because when you focus on meeting the needs of others, on being a channel for divine love and assistance, you align yourself with the universe's fundamental nature, which is giving, expanding, creating. That alignment opens channels for good to flow into your life that ego-based thinking keeps closed. Paradoxically, you manifest more abundantly for yourself when you stop obsessing about yourself and start caring genuinely about the well-being of others. This isn't prosperity gospel nonsense. It's spiritual law. The universe gives to those who give. So I have to ask you, what percentage of your thoughts today have been about your own needs, fears, and desires versus thinking about how you might serve, help, or uplift someone else? Because that ratio tells you exactly why your manifestations look the way they do. Cayce went even further into the mechanics of thought, explaining that every thought you think creates a corresponding change in your physical body. Fearful thoughts create tension, toxicity, disruption of natural healing processes. Loving, peaceful thoughts create harmony, vitality, cellular regeneration. Your health right now is a manifestation of your habitual thought patterns. This isn't mysticism. Modern psychoneuroimmunology confirms that mental states directly affect immune function, hormone balance, inflammation, and even gene expression. Cayce knew this a century ago through his trance readings. Your body is listening to every thought you think, and it's responding accordingly. You're manifesting your health or your disease with every mental pattern you maintain. If you're struggling with chronic health issues, before you manifest healing in your body, you may need to heal the thoughts that created the illness in the first place. Otherwise, you're treating symptoms while maintaining the cause. Cayce treated physical ailments, but he always addressed the mental and spiritual roots. Because healing that doesn't include consciousness, change isn't real healing. It's temporary symptom management. Now let's talk about the biggest obstacle to manifestation that Cayce identified: unworthiness. Deep in the subconscious of most people is a belief that they don't deserve good things. Maybe it came from childhood experiences, religious programming that emphasized human sinfulness, traumatic relationships, or past life karma Cayce often referenced. But this core belief in unworthiness functions as a ceiling on manifestation. You can think abundant thoughts all day, but if your subconscious believes you're not worthy of abundance, it will sabotage every opportunity, create reasons to give away what you receive, or prevent circumstances from aligning in the first place. Cayce taught that addressing unworthiness requires going back to your identity as a spiritual being, a child of the divine, created in the image and likeness of God. Not your ego identity with all its failures and flaws, your soul identity, which is inherently worthy because it's an extension of divine consciousness. Until you reconnect with that truth, manifestation will feel like swimming in concrete. You'll exhaust yourself trying to create what you don't deep down believe you deserve to receive. Here's a practice Cayce would have endorsed, though he phrased it differently. Every morning before your mind fills with the day's worries, consciously set the tone for your thought life. Choose a phrase, a truth, a spiritual principle that aligns with what you intend to create, and saturate your consciousness with it. Not as empty repetition, but as genuine focus. Maybe it's, I am a divine being, manifesting my soul's purpose. Maybe it's, the universe supports my highest good. Maybe it's, I think thoughts of health and my body responds with healing. Whatever it is, install it as the foundation of your mental atmosphere for that day, and when fear, doubt, or negativity arise, and they will, gently return to your chosen truth. You're training your mind the way you'd train a muscle, building strength through repetition and conscious choice. And here's what Cayce emphasized that modern culture has completely lost: patience. We live in an instant gratification society that's forgotten that spiritual laws operate on their own timeline. You don't plant a seed today and harvest tomorrow. There's a season of growth you cannot rush. Cayce taught that trying to force manifestation faster than consciousness can support It actually delays the process. It's like yanking on a seedling to make it grow faster. You'll kill it. Trust the gestation period, hold the vision, maintain the thought pattern. Act as if it's already true in consciousness, and let the universe handle the how and the when. How many manifestations have you cancelled by giving up too soon, deciding it wasn't working, returning to old thought patterns just before the breakthrough was about to occur? Cayce also revealed something profound about gratitude. It's not just a nice spiritual practice, it's a manifestation accelerator. When you feel genuine gratitude for what you have, you're affirming abundance. You're telling your subconscious and the universe, I live in a reality of plenty. That vibration attracts more to be grateful for. Conversely, when you focus on lack, complaining about what you don't have, you're affirming scarcity, and scarcity is exactly what you'll continue to experience. Gratitude isn't about being content with less than you desire. It's about recognizing the abundance that already exists while you're in the process of creating more. So every night before sleep, another powerful time when the subconscious is highly receptive, review your day through the lens of gratitude. What did you receive today, even if it seemed small? What manifested that you might have taken for granted? Who showed up for you? What worked in your favor? Saturate your consciousness with appreciation as you drift into sleep, and you'll program your subconscious to create more experiences that generate gratitude. You're training your mind to look for and create good. Now let's address the question you're probably asking. If thoughts create reality, why hasn't my life changed dramatically since I learned about manifestation? Cayce would say it's because you're likely trying to override decades of unconscious programming with a few days or weeks of conscious intention. Those old patterns have momentum. They're not going to surrender easily. Real transformation requires sustained commitment, not sporadic effort. It's the difference between making a New Year's resolution and embodying a lifestyle change. Most people dabble in conscious manifestation. They think positive for a while, see no immediate results, and return to habitual negativity. That's not how spiritual law works. You have to persist through the gap, hold the new pattern until it becomes your new default, outweigh the old programming with consistent new input. Cayce would also ask, are you manifesting alone or with spiritual support? He constantly emphasized prayer, not begging God for things, but aligning your consciousness with divine will, asking to be a channel for the highest good. When you pray before attempting to manifest, you're inviting divine intelligence to guide your creation, ensuring what you manifest serves your soul's purpose and harms no one. That alignment brings power beyond what ego-driven manifestation can ever access. You're no longer creating alone. You're co-creating with the divine. So practically, what does a day of conscious manifestation look like according to Cayce's principles? You wake and immediately set your mental atmosphere with truth and spiritual focus. Throughout the day, you catch negative thoughts and redirect them. You use imagination consciously to build the reality you desire, not to replay the past or worry about the future. You serve others, which keeps you aligned with universal giving. You meditate to cleanse subconscious debris and access deeper consciousness. You practice gratitude to affirm abundance. You pray to maintain alignment with divine will, and you persist through the gap between thought and form, trusting that consciousness precedes manifestation, that what you're building in mind is already real in the causal realm, awaiting its descent into physical expression. Are you ready to live this way? Not occasionally, but as your daily spiritual practice, because this is what it takes to become a conscious creator rather than an unconscious reactor. Let me leave you with Cayce's most challenging teaching about manifestation. You are manifesting perfectly right now. Your current reality is an exact reflection of your past and present consciousness. If you don't like what you see, don't blame the universe, other people, or circumstances. Look at your thought life. What have you been thinking consistently? What beliefs about yourself, about life, about possibility have you been holding? What emotional frequencies have you been broadcasting? Your external world is showing you your internal world with brutal honesty. It's not punishing you, it's informing you. It's giving you real-time feedback about what you're creating with consciousness. This is either devastating news or the most liberating revelation of your life. It's devastating if you insist on remaining a victim. It's liberating if you're willing to accept total responsibility for your creative power. Because if your thoughts have created your current reality, even the painful parts, then changing your thoughts can create a completely different reality. You're not stuck, you're not doomed. You're not at the mercy of fate or other people or random circumstances. You're a divine creator who's been creating unconsciously, and now you have the opportunity to create consciously. The question isn't whether manifestation works. It works perfectly, always, for everyone. The question is, are you willing to take full responsibility for what you've been manifesting? And are you committed to the discipline required to manifest consciously what your soul came here to experience? Because that's the spiritual path Cayce laid out. Not magic, not shortcuts, but the recognition of who and what you truly are. Consciousness with creative power, here to learn to wield that power in alignment with divine love. Your current life is the evidence of your past thinking. Your future life is being created by what you're thinking right now in this moment. What are you creating? Edgar Cayce discovered that the 60 seconds before you fall asleep might be the most spiritually powerful moment of your entire day, and what you do in those seconds determines whether you wake up aligned with divine abundance or trapped in cycles of lack. In his psychic readings, Cayce revealed that your subconscious mind becomes a direct channel to the universal mind during the transition into sleep, making it the precise moment when spiritual intention transforms into material reality. Most people waste this sacred portal scrolling through phones or replaying anxieties, never realizing they're programming their tomorrow with today's mental garbage. What if the financial struggles, relationship problems, and health challenges you're facing aren't random at all, but direct manifestations of what you've been unconsciously planting in those final waking moments for years? Tonight, before you close your eyes, you'll have a choice. Continue sleepwalking through the most powerful manifesting moment of your day, or finally use it the way your soul intended. What's the last thought you had before falling asleep last night, and is it creating the life you actually want? The alarm clock isn't the first thing that shapes your day. According to Edgar Cayce's trance readings, your day is actually shaped by the final thought you held before losing consciousness the night before. That single intention, planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious as you drift into sleep, begins germinating immediately, sending roots into the universal mind and drawing toward you the exact circumstances that match its vibration. Cayce didn't just theorize about this principle. He gave specific instructions to thousands of people on how to use the pre-sleep state as a spiritual technology for transforming every aspect of life, from financial prosperity to physical healing to soul-level alignment with divine purpose. Here's what most people don't understand about the moments before sleep. Your conscious mind, which usually acts as a gatekeeper filtering what reaches your subconscious, begins to dissolve. The critical faculty that says, "This isn't possible," or "I'm not worthy of this," starts shutting down. Your subconscious mind, which Cayce described as being in direct communion with the universal mind, the mind of God, becomes extraordinarily receptive. It's like the difference between trying to plant seeds in concrete during the day versus planting them in freshly tilled soil at twilight. The pre-sleep state is when your inner soil is most receptive to whatever seeds you choose to plant. But here's the problem. Most people aren't planting seeds of prosperity, health, or spiritual alignment in those sacred moments. They're replaying arguments, rehearsing tomorrow's anxieties, scrolling through social media, filling their subconscious with other people's curated lives and manufactured dramas, worrying about bills, relationships, health problems. And then they wonder why these exact concerns keep manifesting in their waking life, growing stronger and more entrenched with each passing day. Cayce would say you're not a victim of circumstances, you're a victim of your own unconscious pre-sleep programming. In his readings, Cayce explained that the subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between what you want and what you don't want. It simply accepts whatever you give it with emotional intensity and begins working to make it real. If you fall asleep worried about money, your subconscious interprets this as, create more situations that generate worry about money. If you fall asleep feeling alone and unloved, your subconscious says, understood, maintaining frequency of isolation and disconnection. The universe isn't punishing you. You're instructing it every single night to create more of what you're focused on in those final conscious moments. Cayce gave a reading to a businessman who was on the verge of bankruptcy. The man wanted to know what actions he should take to save his business. Instead of giving business advice, Cayce told him something unexpected. Change what you think about in the moments before sleep. For 30 days, Cayce instructed, as you're falling asleep, see yourself surrounded by abundance. Feel gratitude for prosperity that hasn't manifested yet. Imagine successful business transactions. Thank God for divine guidance in all financial matters. The man was skeptical. How could bedtime thoughts save a failing business? But he was desperate enough to try. Within weeks, unexpected contracts appeared. Former clients returned. New opportunities emerged from nowhere. The business not only survived, but thrived. The only thing that changed was his pre-sleep intention. This isn't magical thinking or positive psychology dressed up in spiritual language. Cayce's readings reveal a precise spiritual mechanism at work. During sleep, your soul temporarily withdraws from the physical body and enters other dimensions of consciousness. The intention you set before sleep becomes the directive your soul carries into these realms. If your last waking thought is, "I am divinely guided and provided for," your soul spends the night aligning with frequencies and forces that support that reality. If your last thought is, "I'll never have enough," your soul aligns with lack and limitation. You're literally sending your soul on nightly missions, and the pre-sleep intention is the mission briefing. Cayce explained that the subconscious mind works continuously during sleep, processing, organizing, and most importantly, communicating with the universal mind. This is when your personal consciousness touches the infinite consciousness. The intention you set before sleep becomes the question you're asking the universe, and sleep becomes the time when answers, opportunities, and synchronicities are arranged. You're not just resting during sleep, you're participating in active co-creation with divine intelligence, whether you realize it or not. So what should you actually do with these precious pre-sleep moments? Cayce gave specific guidance. First, release the day. Don't take your problems to bed with you. In the readings, he emphasized that dragging anxieties into sleep is like bringing garbage into a temple. Your sleep state is sacred. Before lying down, consciously release every concern, knowing that worry never solved anything and that divine intelligence is working on your behalf. This isn't about denying problems. It's about refusing to let problems contaminate your most spiritually powerful state. Second, establish a spiritual intention. Cayce recommended that people develop a brief statement or prayer that encapsulates what they want their soul to work on during sleep. This isn't complicated. It might be as simple as, "I am divinely guided in all my ways," or "My body is healing and renewing itself perfectly," or "I am aligned with my highest purpose and prosperity flows to me easily." The key is that it must feel true to you emotionally, even if it isn't true yet in your physical circumstances. Your subconscious responds to feeling, not just words. Third, add gratitude. Cayce emphasized that gratitude is the frequency that activates divine law. As you're setting your pre-sleep intention, feel genuine thanksgiving for its fulfillment, even before seeing evidence in the material world. This isn't pretending or lying to yourself. It's aligning with spiritual truth that exists beyond physical appearance. When you feel grateful for prosperity before it manifests, you're signaling to the universe that you already consider it done, and the universe responds to that frequency by making it so. Here's something Cayce revealed that most people miss entirely. The pre-sleep state isn't just about manifesting material things, it's primarily about spiritual alignment. Every night you have the opportunity to consciously reconnect your personal will with divine will. You can fall asleep asking, "How can I use tomorrow to serve? How can I be a better channel for love? What does my soul need to learn?" These questions, planted in the pre-sleep state, result in waking up with insights, inspiration, and opportunities to fulfill your spiritual mission. Material prosperity follows naturally when you're aligned with spiritual purpose. Cayce worked with a woman who suffered from chronic insomnia. She'd tried everything: medication, sleep techniques, therapy. Nothing worked consistently. In his reading for her, Cayce revealed the root cause. She was terrified of sleep because her pre-sleep thoughts were so negative that she was unconsciously avoiding the subconscious programming they would create. Her mind was protecting her from her own toxic mental patterns by keeping her awake. The solution wasn't sleeping pills, it was transforming what she brought into the pre-sleep state. Once she learned to use those moments for spiritual connection and positive intention, rather than anxious rumination, her insomnia resolved naturally. Think about what this means for you right now. How many nights have you fallen asleep worried, anxious, frustrated, or distracted? And how many of those worries have now become your reality? This isn't about blame, it's about recognizing a pattern and interrupting it. Tonight, you have a choice. You can continue unconsciously programming your tomorrow with yesterday's fears, or you can start using the pre-sleep state as the spiritual technology it actually is. But here's what makes this challenging. Changing your pre-sleep intention requires confronting what you actually believe at the deepest level. If you try to fall asleep thinking, "I am abundant and prosperous," but you don't actually believe it, your subconscious will reject it like a body rejects an incompatible organ transplant. Cayce knew this. That's why he emphasized feeling over words, truth over affirmation. You must find the version of your intention that your heart can genuinely accept right now, even if it's smaller than what you ultimately want. Maybe you can't authentically feel "I am completely financially free" if you're currently drowning in debt. But can you feel "I am open to divine guidance about my finances"? Can you feel "I trust that solutions exist, even if I can't see them yet"? Start where authentic feeling is possible, and your capacity for bigger intentions will grow naturally. Your subconscious knows the difference between genuine faith and desperate wishful thinking. Cayce would say, be honest with yourself. Start with what you can truly feel and build from there. Now let's talk about what happens when you actually do this consistently. Cayce's readings are filled with accounts of people who transformed their lives through intentional pre-sleep practice. Health conditions improved, financial situations shifted, relationships healed. But the most profound changes weren't external, they were internal. People reported waking up with clarity about decisions they'd been struggling with for years. They received creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. They felt guided, supported, connected to something larger than themselves. One of Cayce's most interesting insights was about dreams. He explained that the quality of your pre-sleep intention directly affects the quality and content of your dreams. When you fall asleep with spiritual intention, you're more likely to have dreams that carry guidance, healing, and messages from your higher self. When you fall asleep consumed by anxiety, your dreams tend to be chaotic, anxious, or forgettable. Your pre-sleep state sets the tone for your entire night's consciousness, and what happens during sleep affects everything about how you show up in waking life. There's also a compounding effect. The first night you do this, you might not notice anything dramatic, but after a week, 2 weeks, a month of intentional pre-sleep programming, you'll start to see patterns shifting. Opportunities appear. Problems resolve. You'll find yourself in the right place at the right time more often. This isn't coincidence. This is your soul, armed with clear intention every night, working in cooperation with divine intelligence to rearrange your reality. Cayce called this prayer in action, not begging God for favors, but aligning yourself with divine law and letting it work through you. Here's something crucial that Cayce emphasized. This practice must be paired with right action during waking hours. You can't fall asleep intending abundance and then spend your days being lazy, dishonest, or ungenerous. You can't fall asleep intending health and then abuse your body with terrible habits. Spiritual law requires integrity. Your pre-sleep intention sets the direction and opens doors, but you still have to walk through them. The universe will arrange opportunities, but you must be willing to act when they appear. Divine guidance and human effort work together, not separately. And let's address the obvious question: what if you fall asleep accidentally before you can set your intention? What if you're so exhausted you just crash? Cayce would say, this is why making it a practice matters. Your goal is to train yourself so that positive, spiritually aligned thinking before sleep becomes automatic. It should become as natural as brushing your teeth. Eventually, you won't have to consciously think about it. Your mind will naturally move toward gratitude, peace, and positive expectation as you drift off. But until that becomes automatic, you need to be intentional. Set a reminder. Create a bedtime ritual. Do whatever it takes to protect those sacred final moments of consciousness. There's also power in consistency. Cayce explained that the subconscious mind responds to patterns and repetition. When you set the same intention every night for weeks or months, you're not just programming one night's sleep. You're creating a permanent imprint in your subconscious. Eventually, that intention becomes part of your core identity, and manifestation happens effortlessly because you've fundamentally changed the frequency you're broadcasting. You're no longer trying to create prosperity or health or love. You've become someone who naturally aligns with these things. If you've been engaged with this message and want to explore more of Edgar Cayce's practical spiritual teachings, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. These teachings have been hidden in plain sight for decades, and sharing them helps others discover what their souls have been searching for. Your engagement also helps this content reach people who desperately need to hear it tonight, before they fall asleep unconsciously one more time. But let's go deeper into something Cayce revealed that most people overlook entirely. The pre-sleep state is when you're most receptive to divine communication. Throughout the day, your conscious mind is noisy, distracted, constantly processing external stimuli. But as you drift towards sleep, that noise quiets. The channel becomes clear. This is when God can speak to you most directly, when your soul can receive guidance without interference. If you fill these moments with TV, phone scrolling, or anxious thoughts, you're literally drowning out divine communication with mental static. Cayce encouraged people to view the pre-sleep time as a sacred appointment with the divine. Imagine you had a standing meeting every night with the wisest, most loving being in existence. Would you show up distracted, complaining, and mentally scattered? Or would you arrive present, open, and receptive? That's what the pre-sleep state is. Your daily appointment with God, your higher self, your soul's wisdom. The question isn't whether the appointment is happening, it's happening every night whether you acknowledge it or not. The question is whether you're showing up consciously or unconsciously. Here's what happens when you start showing up consciously. Your intuition strengthens. You start receiving insights at unexpected moments during the day. You become aware of synchronicities you would have missed before. You feel guided, even in situations where you don't have all the information. This isn't magic. It's the natural result of opening a clear communication channel with divine intelligence every single night through intentional pre-sleep practice. You're training yourself to be receptive to guidance, and guidance flows where receptivity exists. Cayce also revealed something profound about protection during sleep. When you fall asleep in fear, anxiety, or negative expectation, you're energetically vulnerable during the night. Your sleep can be troubled, your dreams disturbing, your rest unrefreshing. But when you fall asleep surrounded by spiritual intention and divine presence, when you consciously invoke God's protection and guidance, your sleep becomes a sanctuary. You're held safely in spiritual light while your soul does its work in other dimensions. You wake up refreshed, not just physically, but spiritually renewed. Think about children who naturally do this. They say prayers before bed. They ask for angels to watch over them. They fall asleep feeling protected and loved. Then somewhere along the way to adulthood, we abandon this wisdom, thinking we've outgrown it. We haven't outgrown it. We've forgotten how essential it is. Cayce's readings suggest that our ancient ancestors understood the spiritual power of the pre-sleep state far better than modern people do. They performed rituals, said prayers, created sacred space before sleep because they knew these moments were spiritually potent. We've lost that knowledge, and we're suffering for it. So let's get practical. Tonight, here's what Cayce would recommend you actually do. About 30 minutes before you plan to sleep, begin winding down. Turn off screens. Dim the lights. Create an environment that signals to your mind and body that you're entering sacred time. Use these minutes to review your day not with judgment, but with the question, where did I see God's hand at work today? Where was I aligned with my highest purpose? Where did I miss opportunities for love? Then, as you're lying down ready for sleep, take a few deep breaths. Feel your body relaxing into the bed. Consciously release every concern, visualizing them floating away like leaves on a river. You can come back to practical concerns tomorrow if needed, but for now, release them completely. Your only job in this moment is to set your spiritual intention. Now speak to your subconscious mind and the universal mind as if you're speaking to a beloved friend. Use whatever words feel authentic to you. It might be, "Thank you for guiding me toward my highest good. I trust divine wisdom is working in my life. I am aligned with love, health, and abundance. I sleep in peace and wake in purpose." Or it might be something completely different that resonates with your soul. The exact words matter less than the genuine feeling behind them. As you repeat your intention, feel it emotionally. Don't just think the words. Feel what it would be like if this intention was already your reality. Feel the peace, the gratitude, the trust. Let that feeling expand through your entire body. Hold that feeling as you drift into sleep. If your mind wanders to worries or plans, gently bring it back to your intention and the feeling. The last thing you want to be holding in consciousness is not anxiety about tomorrow, but trust in divine guidance and gratitude for blessings both seen and unseen. Some nights this will feel easy and natural. Other nights, especially when you're stressed or exhausted, it will feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill. Do it anyway. The nights when it's hardest are often when it's most important. Your subconscious mind is like a child. It needs consistency, repetition, and patience. Keep showing up to this practice even when you don't feel like it, even when you don't see immediate results, even when your rational mind says it's pointless. Spiritual law works whether you believe in it or not, but your results accelerate dramatically when you work with it consciously and consistently. Cayce worked with people who said, "I tried this for 3 nights and nothing changed." He would respond, "How many years did you spend programming your subconscious with fear and limitation? Did you expect to undo that in 3 nights? Transformation requires patience and persistence. You're not just changing your thoughts, you're rewiring decades of unconscious programming. You're establishing a new relationship with your subconscious mind, with divine intelligence, with the creative power of the universe. This takes time, but every single night you practice, you're making progress. And here's what's truly beautiful about this teaching. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do it exactly right. You don't need special knowledge or spiritual credentials. You just need sincerity and consistency. Cayce emphasized again and again that God meets us where we are. If all you can authentically offer in your pre-sleep state is, "Help me, I don't know what I'm doing," that's enough. That's a sacred intention. That opens the door for guidance, support, and transformation. As we come to the end of this message, I want you to sit with a question. What has your pre-sleep programming been creating in your life up until now? Look at your current reality, your relationships, your finances, your health, your sense of purpose, and ask yourself honestly, do these reflect the intentions I've been carrying into sleep, or the anxieties and distractions? If you're not happy with what you see, you now know why, and more importantly, you know what to do about it. Tonight is a new beginning. Tonight you can start using the most spiritually powerful 60 seconds of your day as they were meant to be used. Not unconsciously, not anxiously, not as an afterthought, but as a sacred practice of conscious co-creation with divine intelligence. Your soul has been waiting for you to show up to this practice. Your higher self has been trying to guide you, but the channel has been cluttered with worry and distraction. Clear the channel. Set your intention. Fall asleep in trust and gratitude. The life you've been praying for, working for, hoping for, might not be found in doing more during waking hours. It might be found in doing something different in the 60 seconds before consciousness fades into sleep. Cayce knew this. Ancient mystics knew this. Now you know this. The question is, will you actually do it? Will you take these final moments before sleep tonight and use them intentionally, spiritually, powerfully? Or will you continue sleepwalking through the most important part of your day? Everything changes when you change what you bring into sleep. Your tomorrow is being created by your tonight. Your future is being programmed by the thoughts you hold in these precious final moments of waking consciousness. This isn't theory. This isn't philosophy. This is spiritual law that Cayce revealed through thousands of documented readings. And it works for everyone who applies it with sincerity and persistence. Before you watch another video or move on with your day, make a commitment right now. Tonight, I will consciously use the pre-sleep state as a spiritual practice. I will release worry. I will set clear intention. I will fall asleep in trust and gratitude. Make that commitment to yourself, to your soul, to the divine intelligence that's been waiting for you to partner with it consciously. Your life will never be the same. The universe is listening. Your subconscious is ready. All that's missing is your intentional participation. If these teachings have resonated with you, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment sharing what intention you'll be setting tonight. And most importantly, actually do the practice. Don't just admire the teaching, live it. Your soul brought you to this message at exactly the right time. Honor that divine timing by taking what you've learned and putting it into practice starting tonight. The power is already within you. The moment is already sacred. Now align yourself with both and watch everything transform. The spiritual exhaustion plaguing modern souls isn't burnout from overwork. It's the soul's desperate cry that you're living completely misaligned with why you incarnated in this lifetime. Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic in American history, spent decades in trance states revealing a disturbing truth that challenges everything our culture teaches about success and happiness. The majority of people today are spiritually starving themselves to death while chasing goals their soul never chose. In thousands of documented readings given between the 1920s and 1940s, Cayce described a specific type of exhaustion that has nothing to do with physical fatigue, a depletion that occurs when the consciousness is forced to serve purposes that contradict the soul's intended mission. This isn't about needing a vacation or better work-life balance. This is about the fundamental crisis of living someone else's life while your actual purpose slowly suffocates. What Cayce revealed about why you feel this bone-deep tiredness will make you question every priority you've been taught to value. Drop a comment sharing whether you've felt this spiritual exhaustion and what you think might be causing it in your own life. There's a specific kind of tiredness that sleep can't fix, that vacations don't cure, that no amount of rest ever seems to touch. You wake up already exhausted. You go through your days feeling like you're moving through water. You accomplish everything on your to-do list and still feel empty. Edgar Cayce called this spiritual exhaustion, and in his readings he revealed that it's become epidemic in modern life for one devastating reason. Most people are living in complete contradiction to why their soul chose to be here. In his psychic readings, Cayce explained that before each incarnation, the soul makes specific choices about what it needs to learn, what it needs to heal, what it needs to contribute. Your soul doesn't randomly end up in a body. It selects specific circumstances, specific challenges, specific opportunities that will allow it to evolve. But here's what's creating the exhaustion crisis. Modern culture has convinced people to ignore every signal their soul sends about its actual purpose, and instead chase goals that mean absolutely nothing to their spiritual development. Cayce revealed in his trance states that spiritual exhaustion happens when there's a profound disconnect between what you're doing with your life and what you came here to do. Think about what modern culture tells you matters: climbing the corporate ladder, accumulating wealth, gaining status, collecting material possessions, projecting success on social media, being busy and productive every moment. Now ask yourself honestly, did your soul really incarnate into physical form to spend 40 years in a cubicle, optimizing spreadsheets for a corporation that will replace you the moment it's convenient? Did your eternal consciousness really choose human experience so you could spend your precious life comparing yourself to strangers on Instagram? The readings Cayce gave to thousands of people revealed something that should shake everyone awake. When you live misaligned with your soul's purpose, it's not just unsatisfying, it actively depletes your spiritual energy. It's like trying to run an engine on the wrong fuel. You might move forward, but you're damaging yourself with every mile. Cayce described how the soul sends constant signals when you're off path: persistent restlessness, chronic dissatisfaction, the feeling that something is profoundly wrong even when everything looks fine on paper, dreams that disturb you, intuitions you keep ignoring, physical symptoms that doctors can't explain. Most people experience these signals and assume something is wrong with them. They think they need to adjust their attitude, be more grateful, work harder, achieve more. But Cayce revealed the opposite truth. These signals mean something is wrong with how you're living, not with who you are. Your soul is screaming that you're wasting your incarnation on purposes that don't serve your evolution. The exhaustion isn't a personal failing. It's spiritual intelligence trying to redirect you. In reading after reading, Cayce explained that every soul incarnates with specific talents, specific sensitivities, specific inclinations that point toward its intended work. A person drawn to healing isn't drawn to it randomly. That's the soul indicating its purpose. A person who feels called to create isn't experiencing a frivolous desire. That's spiritual direction. A person who feels compelled to teach, to nurture, to build, to explore. These aren't preferences to manage around your real responsibilities. These are the actual reasons you're here. But modern life has become masterful at convincing people to ignore these callings. You're told to be realistic. You're told to choose practical careers. You're told your passions are hobbies, not purposes. You're told to delay what calls to you until after you've spent decades securing financial stability, doing work that means nothing to your soul. And Cayce revealed what happens when people accept this arrangement. They spend their entire incarnation preparing to live, and then they die without ever actually having lived the life their soul intended. The spiritual exhaustion comes from this constant internal warfare. Every day your soul pushes you toward your actual purpose. Every day your conditioned mind pushes you toward what you've been taught matters. The soul says, heal people. The mind says, make money. The soul says, create beauty. The mind says, be productive. The soul says, slow down and listen. The mind says, optimize every moment. This isn't a small conflict. This is your eternal consciousness fighting your temporary programming, and the battlefield is your daily experience. Cayce explained that this conflict doesn't just make you tired, it makes you spiritually sick. In his readings, he connected many physical ailments to this misalignment. Chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, autoimmune disorders, digestive problems, these often weren't just medical conditions. They were the body manifesting what the soul was experiencing. When you force your consciousness to serve purposes it wasn't designed for, when you repeatedly ignore your spiritual direction, when you prioritize external validation over internal truth, your entire system rebels. Here's what makes this so dangerous in modern times. The culture offers endless distractions from these signals. Feel exhausted? There's a pill for that. Feel empty? Here's entertainment to fill the void. Feel restless? Here's another goal to chase. Feel disconnected? Here's a meditation app to use for 10 minutes before returning to the same misaligned life. Cayce saw clearly that these solutions don't address the actual problem. They just numb you to your soul's distress signals until you can barely hear them anymore. In his readings, Cayce emphasized that the solution isn't complex, but it is radical. You have to actually align your life with why your soul is here. Not partially, not in your spare time, not after you retire, now, fully, with the same commitment you currently give to purposes that deplete you. This doesn't necessarily mean quitting your job tomorrow or abandoning all responsibilities. Cayce wasn't prescribing recklessness. But it does mean you have to be honest about what your soul is calling you toward and start structuring your life around that truth instead of around culturally approved timelines and expectations. What would this actually look like? For some people, it means finally pursuing the healing work they've always felt called to. For others, it means using their platform to teach what they've learned. For others, it means creating the art they've been suppressing. For others, it means building something meaningful instead of just earning money. For others, it means simplifying their entire life so they have space for what actually matters to their soul. The specifics vary, but Cayce revealed the principle remains constant. When you align your daily life with your soul's purpose, the spiritual exhaustion begins to lift. But here's what most people don't want to hear. This alignment usually requires sacrifice. Not the sacrifice of your well-being, that's what you're already sacrificing by living misaligned. The sacrifice of your security, your comfort, your social approval, your culturally validated identity. Cayce's readings made clear that the soul's purpose rarely coincides with easy, safe, socially approved paths. Your soul didn't incarnate to play it safe. It incarnated to evolve, and evolution requires challenges that stretch you beyond what's comfortable. This is where most people get stuck. They feel the exhaustion, they sense the misalignment, they even know what their soul is calling them toward. But they look at what they'd have to release to follow that calling: the stable income, the respected career, the approval of family, the predictable life, and they decide the exhaustion is more tolerable than the uncertainty. Cayce revealed this is the tragedy of modern spiritual life. People dying slow deaths of exhaustion because they're too afraid to risk living. Are you one of them? Are you so busy being responsible, being practical, being realistic that you've forgotten to be who you actually are? Have you constructed such an elaborate prison of obligations and expectations that you can't even remember what your soul wanted before culture told you what you should want? The exhaustion you feel isn't random. It's not a chemical imbalance. It's not a personality flaw. It's your soul showing you exactly how far off path you've wandered. Cayce explained in his readings that the soul is remarkably patient. It will send signals for decades if necessary. But there's a threshold where patience becomes enabling, where the gentle nudges become crisis, where the whispered direction becomes screaming pain. Many people only finally align with their purpose after everything falls apart. After the health crisis, after the breakdown, after the loss so profound it breaks through all the conditioning and forces them to face what actually matters. Cayce saw this pattern repeatedly. People who wouldn't listen to gentle spiritual exhaustion finally transformed when life delivered unmistakable wake-up calls. But it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to wait for catastrophe to get your attention. You can choose now to take the exhaustion seriously. You can choose now to ask yourself the questions that culture has trained you to avoid. What is my soul actually here to do? What have I always felt called toward that I've been taught to dismiss? What would my life look like if I prioritized spiritual truth over social approval? What am I afraid would happen if I actually followed my soul's direction? These aren't rhetorical questions. These are diagnostic tools. Your answers reveal exactly where and why you're exhausted. If you can't even identify what your soul wants, because you've spent so long ignoring it, that's the exhaustion speaking. If you know what your soul wants, but immediately list 10 reasons why it's impossible, that's the conditioning speaking. If you feel anger or grief rising as you consider these questions, that's the accumulated pain of years spent betraying your own purpose. Cayce revealed that reconnecting with your soul's purpose doesn't require mystical abilities or special knowledge. It requires brutal honesty and courageous action. You have to be willing to admit that the life you've built might not be the life you're meant to live. You have to be willing to disappoint people who've invested in your current identity. You have to be willing to look foolish, to start over, to admit you've been wrong, to choose meaning over security. The spiritual exhaustion is actually a gift, though it doesn't feel like one. It's your soul refusing to let you settle for a life that wastes your incarnation. It's your consciousness creating enough discomfort that you can't stay unconscious anymore. It's the divine within you loving you enough to make misalignment intolerable. Most people curse the exhaustion and medicate it and distract from it. Cayce would say you should thank it and follow where it's trying to lead you. If you felt something shift as you've listened to this, if something has been stirred that you've been trying to keep buried, that's not random. That's recognition. That's your soul confirming what you've known but haven't wanted to face. The question isn't whether you're living misaligned. The exhaustion has already answered that. The question is whether you love yourself enough to do something about it. Before we go deeper, if this message is resonating with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. This kind of content challenges everything culture teaches, and your support helps these truths reach people who desperately need to hear them. Also, share in the comments what aspect of your life you suspect is most out of alignment with your soul's purpose. Sometimes, just naming it begins the transformation. Cayce explained that realigning with your soul's purpose isn't a one-time decision. It's a practice of daily choices. Every decision you make either serves your soul's evolution or serves your conditioning. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, truth over comfort, meaning over status, you feed your soul instead of starving it. The exhaustion begins to lift, not when your circumstances become perfect, but when your choices become aligned. This is why people can be exhausted in luxury and energized in struggle. This is why someone living simply while pursuing their purpose feels more alive than someone living lavishly while betraying their calling. Cayce revealed that spiritual energy doesn't come from external conditions. It comes from internal alignment. When what you do matches who you are, when your daily life reflects your soul's intentions, energy flows. When there's disconnect, energy depletes. In his readings, Cayce also addressed another dimension of modern spiritual exhaustion. People aren't just misaligned with their own purpose, they're surrounded by collective misalignment. You're living in a culture that has elevated exhaustion to a virtue, that celebrates busyness as success, that equates worth with productivity, that treats rest as laziness and reflection as self-indulgence. This cultural insanity doesn't just affect you, it reinforces your personal misalignment every single day. Think about the language modern culture uses: grinding, hustling, crushing it, killing it. These are violent metaphors applied to how you're supposed to approach life. Cayce revealed that this isn't accidental. When you're at war with your time, at war with your pace, at war with your natural rhythms, you can't hear your soul's guidance. The exhaustion serves the system that profits from your misalignment. A spiritually exhausted person is a compliant person, a consuming person, a distracted person. Your exhaustion doesn't threaten the status quo. Your spiritual alignment does. This is perhaps why true spiritual alignment feels so radical. It's not just about changing your career or your schedule. It's about completely rejecting a worldview that treats you as an economic unit, instead of as an eternal soul having a temporary human experience. It's about remembering that you're not here to serve corporations, governments, social expectations, or anyone else's vision of who you should be. You're here for purposes your soul chose before any of those constructs existed. Cayce would ask you, what if everything you've been taught about success is designed to keep you from your actual purpose? What if the exhaustion you feel isn't a personal failure, but the appropriate response to living in systematic misalignment? What if the life you think you should want is precisely what's killing your spirit? What if the path to spiritual energy isn't about optimizing your misaligned life, but about having the courage to build a completely different one? These questions don't have comfortable answers. They have honest answers. And honest answers require you to admit things you've been avoiding, that you've been living for approval instead of purpose, that you've been measuring success by metrics that don't measure what actually matters, that you've been so busy climbing a ladder you never asked if it was leaning against the right wall, that you've been calling existence life when you haven't truly been alive in years. The spiritual exhaustion is trying to save you from wasting your incarnation. It's trying to wake you up before it's too late. It's creating enough discomfort that you finally have to choose: keep dying slowly in a misaligned life, or risk living in alignment with your soul's actual purpose. Cayce revealed that this choice is the fundamental spiritual crisis of human existence, and modern culture has made it more acute than ever. What are you going to do with this information? Are you going to acknowledge that something profound is off and commit to discovering what your soul actually wants? Are you going to start making daily choices that serve your spiritual evolution instead of your conditioning? Are you going to risk the discomfort of change rather than accept the exhaustion of stagnation? Or are you going to close this video, return to your misaligned life, and hope the exhaustion somehow fixes itself while you continue ignoring every signal your soul sends? Cayce spent decades in trance states, revealing spiritual truths that were meant to transform lives, not just inform minds. The exhaustion you feel is your soul refusing to let you forget that you're here for something more than you're currently living. The question is whether you're finally ready to listen, or whether you'll need more pain before you're willing to change. Your soul is waiting. Your purpose is waiting. Your actual life is waiting. The exhaustion is just the alarm that keeps getting louder until you finally wake up. What will it take for you to finally answer the call? Comment below and let's continue this crucial conversation about reclaiming your spiritual vitality by aligning with your soul's true purpose. The richest man who ever heard Jesus speak walked away heartbroken. And for 2,000 years, Christianity got the lesson completely wrong. In his psychic readings, Edgar Cayce revealed that when Jesus spoke about a camel passing through the eye of a needle, he wasn't condemning wealth. He was unveiling a cosmic law about spiritual density that determines whether your soul can transition into higher dimensions after death. Every material attachment you refuse to release creates an energetic weight that literally prevents your consciousness from ascending through the narrow gateway between worlds. The needle isn't a metaphor for difficulty. It's the actual dimensional aperture your soul must traverse, and the camel represents the accumulated spiritual baggage of earthly identification. Right now, in this moment, you're either lightening your soul's load or adding to the weight that will trap you in lower planes of existence when your body expires. What attachments are you carrying that will prevent your soul from passing through? When the rich young ruler approached Jesus and asked what he must do to inherit eternal life, he had no idea he was about to receive one of the most misunderstood teachings in human history. Jesus told him to sell everything he owned, give to the poor and follow him. The man's face fell and he walked away grieving, for he had great possessions. Then Jesus turned to his disciples and delivered the words that have puzzled theologians for millennia. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. For centuries, religious scholars have twisted themselves into intellectual knots, trying to make this teaching more palatable. Some claimed Jesus was referring to a small gate in Jerusalem's wall called the Needle's Eye, where camels had to kneel to squeeze through. Others suggested the word camel was a mistranslation of rope. These interpretations all share one thing in common: their attempts to soften a teaching that cuts to the very core of spiritual law. Edgar Cayce, in his deep trance states accessing the universal consciousness, revealed what Jesus actually meant, and it's far more profound and terrifying than any comfortable reinterpretation. Cayce explained that Jesus wasn't speaking metaphorically about difficulty or improbability. He was describing a literal spiritual mechanism that governs the soul's transition between dimensions of existence. When your physical body dies, your consciousness must pass through what Cayce called the borderland, a threshold between the material plane and the spiritual realms. This threshold isn't a physical location, but a vibrational frequency, a dimensional aperture that only consciousness of a certain density can traverse. The eye of the needle represents the precise vibrational frequency required to pass into higher spiritual dimensions. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Every attachment to material things, every identification with earthly possessions, every ounce of spiritual energy you've invested in accumulating and holding wealth creates density in your soul. Cayce revealed that matter and spirit operate on opposite principles. Matter is dense, contracted, heavy. Spirit is light, expansive, free. When you pour your consciousness into material things, not just owning them but making them central to your identity and sense of security, you're literally making your soul heavier, denser, more materialized. You're taking on the vibrational characteristics of the things you're attached to. The camel in Jesus' teaching represents a soul so laden with material identification that it cannot compress itself enough to pass through the narrow vibrational gateway into higher consciousness. Think about what a camel is: a beast of burden designed to carry heavy loads across harsh terrain. When Jesus said a camel cannot pass through the eye of a needle, he was saying that a soul carrying the heavy burden of material attachment cannot traverse the dimensional threshold that requires spiritual lightness. It's not about God punishing the wealthy, it's about spiritual physics, the immutable laws governing consciousness and its movement through different planes of existence. But here's what makes Cayce's interpretation revolutionary. It's not about the money itself. It's not about the possessions. It's about where you've placed your sense of identity, security, and purpose. Cayce revealed in his readings that some of the wealthiest individuals in history had achieved high spiritual development because they understood that they were stewards, not owners. They knew their wealth was a tool for service, not a foundation for their sense of self. Conversely, Cayce described people with almost nothing who were spiritually impoverished because they obsessed over the little they had and envied what others possessed. The spiritual weight isn't in your bank account, it's in your heart's relationship to what you have. Are you living as an owner or a steward? When you think about your possessions, your money, your property, do you feel a sense of anxious grip, a fear of loss, a need to protect and accumulate? Or do you hold them lightly, recognizing them as temporary instruments that flow through your care for a season? This distinction determines whether you're adding spiritual density or maintaining the lightness necessary for soul ascension. Every day you wake up, you're making choices that either burden your soul with material gravity or free it for spiritual flight. Which direction are you moving? Cayce explained that the process of dying to self that Jesus constantly taught wasn't about physical death or even about suffering. It was about releasing identification with the material world while still living in it. This is infinitely harder than simply being poor. Anyone can lack possessions, but to have abundance and not be spiritually defined by it, to enjoy comfort without being attached to it, to use wealth without letting it use you, this requires a level of conscious awareness that most people never achieve. You're being tested every single day, in every purchase, every financial decision, every moment you check your bank balance or compare yourself to others. The rich young ruler's tragedy wasn't that he had money, it was that the money had him. When Jesus asked him to release it, the man's grief revealed where his true treasure lay. His identity, his security, his sense of worth, all of it was bound up in his possessions. He couldn't imagine himself without them. His soul had become so intertwined with material things that separating from them felt like death. And in a sense it was. It would have been the death of the false self he'd constructed around his wealth. But that death is precisely what's required for spiritual rebirth. You cannot carry your material identity through the eye of the needle. It won't fit. The gateway is too narrow for anything except pure consciousness, divested of earthly identification. Cayce revealed something even more startling. This principle doesn't only apply at physical death. Right now, in this lifetime, there are higher dimensions of consciousness, deeper revelations of spiritual truth, more profound experiences of divine presence that are available to you, but you cannot access them while carrying the weight of material attachment. The eye of the needle exists in the present moment, not just at the end of life. Every time you try to enter deeper meditation, every time you seek to experience unity with the divine, every time you reach for higher spiritual understanding, you encounter this same threshold. Can your consciousness compress itself enough to pass through? Or are you too laden with the baggage of material concern? Think about the times you've tried to pray or meditate, but found your mind immediately flooding with thoughts about money, possessions, bills, purchases, or status. That's the weight of material attachment making itself known. Your consciousness is trying to ascend to spiritual frequencies, but it's being pulled back down by the gravitational force of earthly identification. The camel cannot fit through the needle because it refuses to put down its load. Are you refusing to put down yours? Jesus immediately followed his statement about the camel and the needle with a promise. With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Cayce illuminated this seemingly contradictory statement. He explained that the human ego, the material self, cannot release its attachments through willpower alone. The grip of material identification is too strong, too deeply woven into the sense of self. But when you align with the Christ consciousness, when you invite divine presence to transform your relationship with the material world, what was impossible becomes not only possible, but natural. The attachments that seemed unbreakable begin to loosen. The things you thought you couldn't live without lose their hold on your heart. Your identity shifts from what you have to who you are in God. This is why Jesus connected the command to sell everything with the invitation to follow me. Following Christ isn't primarily about believing correct doctrines or performing religious rituals. It's about allowing the Christ consciousness to recalibrate your entire relationship with material reality. It's about learning to live in the world without being defined by it, to use material things without being used by them, to hold possessions with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. This transformation cannot be manufactured through human effort. It requires surrender to a power greater than yourself, a willingness to let divine love replace material security as your foundation. Cayce described the soul's journey through multiple lifetimes as a gradual process of learning this very lesson. In some incarnations you experience poverty to learn that your worth isn't determined by what you have. In others, you experience wealth to learn that abundance doesn't secure your soul. Some of the most spiritually advanced souls Cayce encountered in his readings had lived both extremes and finally transcended the entire paradigm. They'd learned that the soul's true treasure is its relationship with the divine, and everything else is just temporary scenery in the theater of spiritual growth. But here's the urgent question. How many more lifetimes will you need to learn this lesson? How many more incarnations of accumulating and losing, grasping and grieving, building and watching it all crumble? You have the opportunity right now, in this very lifetime, to break the cycle. You can choose to live as the rich young ruler, walking away from spiritual advancement because you can't release material identification. Or you can choose to be like Peter and John and the other disciples who left their nets, their boats, their entire material security to follow the path of consciousness transformation. The choice isn't between being rich or poor, it's between being owned by your possessions or being free. Examine your life honestly. What would you absolutely refuse to give up if a spiritual teacher asked you to? What possession, what financial security, what lifestyle comfort feels so essential that losing it seems unthinkable? That's your camel. That's the load preventing your soul from passing through the eye of the needle. It might be a literal possession, a home, a car, a bank balance. Or it might be something more subtle, a certain standard of living, a reputation for success, an identity as someone who has made it. Whatever it is, it's functioning as a spiritual anchor, keeping your consciousness tethered to material frequency when it's designed to soar into divine realms. Cayce emphasized repeatedly that the goal isn't poverty, it's freedom. Some souls are called to literal simplicity, owning almost nothing. Others are called to be stewards of great abundance, using wealth as an instrument of service and love. What matters is your internal relationship to whatever you have. Can you hold it loosely? Can you enjoy it without needing it? Can you use it without being defined by it? Can you lose it tomorrow without losing your sense of identity and security? If the answer is no, then regardless of how much or how little you own, you're too heavy to pass through the needle's eye. This teaching becomes even more critical when you understand what Cayce revealed about the afterlife transition. At the moment of physical death, your consciousness begins to vibrate at its true frequency, no longer restrained by the density of the physical body. If you've spent your earthly life identifying with material things, your consciousness remains attracted to material vibrations even after leaving the body. Cayce described souls who lingered for years in what he called earthbound conditions, unable to ascend to higher spiritual planes because they couldn't release their attachment to physical possessions, locations, or material concerns. They hover near their former homes, their wealth, their prized possessions, trapped by the very things they thought made them successful in life. The eye of the needle becomes impassable, not because God blocks the way, but because the soul cannot fit through while carrying material density. It's like trying to bring furniture through a doorway too narrow for it to pass. You can push and struggle all you want, but the physics of the situation makes it impossible. The furniture has to be left behind. The soul must release its identification with material form to ascend to spiritual frequency. Those who cannot or will not make this release find themselves stuck in intermediate realms, neither fully spiritual nor able to return to physical embodiment, haunted by the attachments they refuse to surrender. Is this where you're headed? Based on your current relationship with material things, based on where you've invested your consciousness and sense of identity, will you be able to pass through when your time comes? Or will you be like the rich man in Jesus' parable about Lazarus, trapped in torment, not because of divine punishment, but because you built your entire sense of self on material foundation that crumbled the moment you left your body? The gulf between material consciousness and spiritual consciousness is real, and it's crossed by releasing attachment, not by accumulating wealth or religious credentials. If you're feeling convicted right now, if this teaching is making you uncomfortable, that's actually a sign of spiritual health. It means your soul recognizes truth even when your ego resists it. The rich young ruler walked away sad because he heard the truth but couldn't bear to act on it. Don't make his mistake. That sadness, that conviction, that discomfort. It's the Christ consciousness calling you to transformation. It's the divine spirit inviting you to put down your burden and discover the lightness of soul that allows passage through the needle's eye. Cayce gave practical guidance for this process. He recommended daily meditation not as a religious duty, but as conscious practice in releasing attachment. In meditation, you practice letting go of thoughts about material concerns. You practice resting in awareness that isn't dependent on possessions or circumstances. You practice identifying with your eternal spiritual nature rather than your temporary material conditions. This isn't escapism, it's training. You're literally exercising your soul's ability to disengage from material identification, so that when the moment of transition comes, whether in death or in mystical awakening, you'll be able to pass through. He also emphasized service as essential spiritual practice. When you give freely of your time, energy, and resources to help others, you're actively loosening the grip of material attachment. Every act of generosity is a small death to the ego's need to accumulate and control. Every moment of selfless service reminds you that your true identity isn't person who owns things, but soul who loves and serves. This is why Jesus connected selling possessions with giving to the poor, not as random commands, but as a unified spiritual practice of transformation. But let's confront the harder question. What if you're not willing? What if, like the rich young ruler, you hear all of this and still can't imagine actually releasing your attachment to material security and comfort? What if the thought of depending entirely on divine providence instead of your bank balance terrifies you? What if you'd rather stay spiritually stunted than risk the vulnerability of material surrender? Then you have your answer about whether you'll fit through the needle's eye. You've chosen the camel's burden over the soul's freedom. And that choice will follow you beyond this lifetime, shaping your consciousness in death as it has in life. The eye of the needle is waiting. It's always been there, patient and unchanging, the gateway to higher consciousness and divine union. Your soul was designed to pass through it, to experience the liberation and joy of existence unencumbered by material density. But you cannot take your treasures with you. You cannot squeeze your possessions, your wealth, your material identity through that narrow opening. Something has to be left behind. The only question is whether you'll release it now, in this lifetime, through conscious choice and spiritual practice, or whether you'll be forced to release it in death, having wasted your entire earthly existence building and protecting what you could never keep. Jesus looked at the rich young ruler with love, Cayce revealed, even as he walked away. The invitation remains open. The path is still available. The transformation is still possible. But it requires decision. It requires action. It requires the courage to examine every attachment, every material identification, every place where you've built your sense of security on earthly foundation, and the willingness to surrender it all to divine care, not because material things are evil, but because your soul is destined for dimensions of consciousness that material density cannot access. You're being called to something infinitely greater than anything money can buy, but you can only receive it with empty hands and an unburdened heart. So here's where we end, not with comfortable conclusions, but with the question that matters most. Are you going to walk away sad like the rich young ruler, unwilling to release what prevents your soul's ascension? Or are you going to take Jesus at his word, trust the spiritual physics Cayce revealed, and begin the sacred work of lightening your soul's load? Your eternity, not just after death, but the quality of consciousness you experience right now, today, in this very moment, depends on your answer. The needle's eye is narrow, the camel cannot pass through. What will you choose?